Welcome to Media in the Mix, the only podcast produced and hosted by the School of Communication at American University. Join us as we create a safe space to explore topics and communication at the intersection of social justice, tech, innovation, and pop culture. Welcome back to Media in the Mix, listeners. I'm your host, Grace Ibrahim. This episode of Media in the Mix is special for a number of reasons. First, we're celebrating SOC's 30th anniversary with two very, very special guests. Hurst Senior Professorial Lecturer Pallavi Kumar and Professor and Interim Dean Leena Jayaswal. Not only that, but this entire podcast episode you're hearing and watching today comes to you care of SOC students participating in our first ever Media in the Mix experiential learning demo. A team of 6 students worked together in our media production center to produce the episode from lights to set design to sound to a 3-camera setup. So sit back and enjoy all of their hard work.
Hi, I'm Pallavi Kumar, and I am a Hurst Senior Professorial Lecturer at American University, and I also graduated from AU with a degree in CLEG from the School of Public Affairs and a Public Communication degree from the School of Communication.
Hi, I'm Leena Jayaswal. I'm currently the Interim Dean for the School of Communication, and I also graduated from SOC with a double major in visual media and anthropology.
So when I first decided to come to American University, it's because I had done a program in high school where you spent a week in Washington, and I fell in love with Washington. And so I, toured a lot of different schools, and AU, for some reason, when I stepped onto campus, onto the quad, that was like the moment for me. And it still remains like my favorite place on campus, because for me, American was kind of the perfect place because it's in Washington, but it had a campus. And so there was a community field, but yet great opportunity beyond, the Northwest boundaries that we live in. And as far as a fun fact for during that time, which I'm sure Leena remembers, although I can't actually say I ever actually had one, but the tavern actually used to serve beer on campus, and it actually had a beautiful bar. And I think for students now, that is something they just can't even believe. And so I think that's just a really funny thing to think about, the community that was in the tavern. And I lived in Hughes Hall, and we used to have a contest. It was called Mr. Hughes Hall. And it was a male beauty contest. See, we were ahead of our time in terms of gender stereotypes. But anyway, so I just really have fond memories of the tavern as being sort of a gathering place, which now it's not at all.
So I came to AU very similar to Pallavi's story. I went to a sort of a leadership conference for a week in DC, and I always wanted to go to a big city for college, and my parents at that time said, New York is out. We will not let you go to New York City. So I was like, DC is it. And I looked at American, and I knew immediately. I did early decision and got in. They sent me a sweatshirt. So I was locked in, and I still have the sweatshirt. So I knew AU was going to be the place for me. My favorite spot on campus is still my favorite spot on campus, and it's the photography labs, because I'm also the director of the photography program, and that has never changed. Walking in and being immersed in the chemicals and just looking at the film and working in the darkroom, that's always my favorite place on campus. I guess one of my favorite things about AU back then is we used to have a lot of concerts, and we brought in some great bands. And so the big one probably was Nirvana, and it was like 3 weeks before a month or so before Kurt Cobain committed suicide. So it was the Breeders and Nirvana, and Bender Arena sold out, amazing. But we had like Red Hot Chili Peppers and Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins all on the same bill in the gym in Bender Arena. We had little shows at the tavern, and so that was always part of my favorite parts of AU.
Sure. So I remember when I first heard the news that SOC was going to be an independent school, I still kind of remember that moment. And I remember thinking, yeah, it should be an independent school. We were under the College of Arts and Sciences from our inception. And so I heard that news as a student. I didn't really fully realize kind of what that meant, but I just remember thinking that independence is a good thing. And I think the one thing for me in terms of seeing how the school has changed and evolved through the years is that, as a student, I really loved my SOC classes. It's where I connected most with my professors. And, that nurturing aspect is something that I still think exists today. So I like that we've had that, but at the same time, we've gotten so much bigger, so much more prestigious, I would say. And I look at the alumni network that has been established. And for me, I started teaching as an adjunct in 2002. And I'm one of those like nerdy people that like wrote in my journal about like what I wanted to do. And I still have, like when I was, 22, I wrote, I want to be a college professor. And so even though I went and pursued public relations in New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., I worked in all these huge firms, Ketchum, Fleischman, Reuter Finn, all of those things. My heart was always wanting to teach. I never thought I'd do it full time. I always thought I would just teach as an adjunct, which I started in 2002. And actually this year is my 22nd year teaching at American. And then I joined the faculty full time in 2009, and I became the division director. I don't even know the date, 2014, I think, for 8 years. And so for me, the trajectory of SOC and also the trajectory of my life are kind of very, combined in some ways, because I think both have come into unexpected places. I think one of the big things for SOC in the past 30 years is that we got our own building. We were in the third floor of Mary Graydon for so long, and it was just, it was a great cozy space, but it didn't, it wasn't our full potential of what we could do and who we could be. And so having our own building is something that I think is really special. And I think all the programs that we have, all the graduate degrees that we have, obviously SOC3, which is the student-powered agency I launched last year, is a huge addition. And, we're always doing so many exciting things that sometimes it's hard to sort of highlight one specific thing, but that energy of what everybody does and that sort of commitment to excel in that space of telling stories is something that I'm so grateful for.
So one of the things that I have noticed, one of the great things, so when we graduated in 1994, it was the 30th, this year is our 30th year graduating. When the school became, I still remember graduation. I don't know if you really remember. I remember sitting in the seat, and we were with SIS. That was the other school that was at our graduation. And they got little flags, and we had a business card holder. And that was what we were given as our gift. And I remember just sitting there and being like, this is something that's special, because it's the first year. Every announcement was made about this is the first graduating class of the school separating. And so there was real magic to that. And I started actually teaching as an adjunct in 1995. So I started the year after I started teaching, and I was staff. So I have had every role possible except for graduate student at an SOC. So I was an adjunct, I was staff member, I was term faculty, I was tenure track, tenured, full professor, associate dean, inclusion, the university's first inclusion officer, and now I'm the interim dean. So I don't know where there is for me to go from SOC, but I'm also program director. So I have literally had every possible role that I could have, and that is because of mentorship. So I had a fantastic Ansel professor who saw something in me and was, I was her teaching assistant, and she said, you should really do this. And I had never thought about being a professor or teaching or anything like that. I just wanted to be a photographer. Knew I wanted to be a photographer since I was in third grade. And she said, no, you've got something here. Like, you should do this. And they gave me the first opportunity to teach a class. And I was 21, 22 when I taught. I looked much younger than any of my the students that I was taking, that were taking the class with me. But it put the bug in me. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can be a photographer. I can be a filmmaker. I can do all the things that I want and also have a steady income coming in and impact the next generation, or at that time, my current generation. So I fell in love with it. And I am so grateful that she saw something in me that I would never have imagined or thought of. And I was actually sitting on her front porch. She brought me in. She lives in North Carolina. She brought me in to do a screening of my latest movie when the announcement went out that I was going to become the interim dean. And I just thought it was so full circle that I was sitting here with this woman who gave me this incredible life. And that's the specialness of SOC, is your professors know who you are. It is not some big lecture class where you're one out of 100 people, but your professors really know who you are, and they keep track of you. They follow you. Your successes are our successes. We couldn't be prouder, when we hear something that happens to some of our former students, because we know we had a very, very, very small part of that. And so that to me is like some of the best parts of SOC. In terms of its growth, we have grown into a real strong school of our own, where we have multiple centers. So we have the Center for Environmental Filmmaking, the Investigative Reporting Workshop, the Center for Media and Social Impact. We have so many of these other greater organizations that are building our reputation nationally and internationally. And so people know what SOC does and who we are in ways that when we were in school wasn't there.
Yeah, so absolutely. I totally agree with what Leena said about mentorship. So, I had a couple interesting things happen that kind of led me to this place. So the Career Center for me was a super special place when I was at American, because, I was a first generation college student. I was a Pell recipient. My parents didn't go to college. There wasn't a lot of support at AU back then, even for that type of student. Now I'm so pleased to see how much we do for those students. And so and I was picking a career that wasn't the traditional, Asian, it was either like business or medicine. That was pretty much it. And so I wanted, I came to Washington in the School of Public Affairs to study government, and it wasn't really something that I couldn't see myself being a legislative assistant on the Hill, although I did enjoy the classes. And so I had gone to this Career Center panel, and an alum was there, David Park, and he had graduated from SOC, actually as a journalism major, but he worked at Ogilvy PR, and he talked about that, what he did. And I was just mesmerized. And I said, well, this is exactly what I like to do. I like to write. I like to think creatively. I like to think strategically. So I remember going back to Hughes Hall, sitting with the old course catalog, which I still miss, and flipping through and seeing, well, what is this PR thing? And seeing that we had an entire degree. And I was already a CLEG major that had taken comm classes as part of that major. So it was so easy for me to double major. And that was, from that moment, I think that was end of sophomore year, I went on and I interned, for every semester then that I was at AU, which is another great thing that we bring. And so for me, that was just the turning point. And then I remember the Career Center, they asked me to be on a panel. And for me, that was like, oh my God, I've made it, because I had so much sort of self-doubt back then. But, the Career Center was such a nurturing place for me, because it gave me the confidence that I could get these internships. I even got a White House internship, which was like such a great moment. I actually quit 2 weeks later because I was disillusioned by what I was getting, and it was unpaid, which I didn't think was fair, and I needed to make money. But, I think that for me, that mentorship was important in terms of that. And then as for teaching, Rick Stack was a professor when I was a student. I never had him, but, he was the one I contacted from my early days of being 22 and saying, I want to teach. And, he was really the one. He gave me my first shot. He gave me 3 weeks notice for my first class. And I famously ran out of material 40 minutes into a 2.5-hour block. Never happened again. But he was really the one that gave me that confidence. And I would say that was the case for, I was an adjunct for 7 years. And so I always had people, Rick Stack, Daryl Hayes, and then later Lenny Steinhorn, always kind of had my back in terms of, and then gave me the full-time opportunity that I wanted as well. Well, I mean, last year was pretty darn memorable for me. I, launched SOC3, which was sort of my dream come true in terms of having, I always knew our students do great work, and I wanted it to be showcased in a way that would bring the school more, prestige. And I think we're definitely getting there. We've had 2 paying clients, the Home Depot and Aldi, which has been fantastic. I also, my students in my other class, we won the Arthur Page Global Case Study Competition, came in 2nd place, which is, again, getting your name out there is such an important thing for SOC. And so those students, when they called me, like, I can't even tell you how excited I was that they won. And then I also won Outstanding full-time faculty member in teaching last year as well. So I think that's also like lovely that you can be doing something for so long and you can still be sort of surprised at what is to come. And I think I'm sure Leena would say the same thing. I think that's what keeps us so engaged with this community. And then, I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't hear from an alum or, and and my sister, I just got a sweet note yesterday from a student, and my sister said, I hope you save these in a scrapbook somewhere. I was like, I'm not that organized. But I will say that relationship that Leena talked about in terms of the student and us knowing our students and championing them, it's a lifelong relationship, right? Like the 2 clients that I have had for SOC3 that are our first paying clients, they were both my students. And so I think that's just amazing, that full circle that's there. And that's what students who come to AU, who come to SOC, that's what they're signing up for, which is great.
So I don't know if I could pick a year. There's just been some real strong highlights. So the first I would say is being able to create an undergrad major in photography. That was a lifelong dream for me at SOC. I came here knowing that I was going to study photography, but there wasn't a major in photography. It was part of the film program. And I remember taking classes in film and being like, I'm never going to be a filmmaker. Why do I even have to take these classes? It's part of my requirement. And now I'm an award-winning filmmaker. And so AU knew better for me than I did, really. But all my entire teaching career, I wanted to have a degree in photography. And being able to get that herded through, it's a joint degree in the College of Arts and Sciences, but getting that through was years in the making. And so to be able to launch that, it's been probably a strong highlight of my career here. That same year that we launched, we also moved into the Media Production Center. And so we had brand new space. We had water that could be regulated temperature-wise. I mean, we had all of this great stuff here. 6 weeks later, we didn't even get through a full semester, but 6 weeks later, then the pandemic hit, and we had to close up shop for a little bit, but we were back here. So those are some of the kind of just some of the highlights. But this past year has been like a crazy whirlwind of everything, being the interim dean and being able to know the school on a level that I hadn't ever known before. I feel much more a stronger hold to the school than I ever have because I'm a part of so much of it now. I joke with my parents. I lived with them for 17 years. AU has been my longest relationship. I think I've been here for 34 years, So AU's in my blood and SOC's in my blood, and being able to represent as the interim dean has really, again, been such a meaningful experience for me to be able to go talk to people about the great things we do and raise money for some of our programs and get our name out there. I'm so pleased to be able to be a representative. And going to one last thing. So just a couple weeks ago, we were in LA on a development trip. And we had met with all the people that we needed to meet that were like, a little bit of a wealthier backgrounds. And I said to my development team, I said, I want to have an open, let's just meet at a bar, do a happy hour, and put a call out to any students that just recently graduated to come and meet us, come for hang out for a little bit. And we had about 25 people RSVP, but we had about 45 students former students come. And we had people from 1970 that graduated from 1973 to 2021. And I knew almost everybody in the room. I didn't know the people from 1973, but, that to me that's what we're talking about, is that we've created these relationships with these students that they all just came out to see what was going on, to see myself, see Russell Williams, who's another colleague, a former professor. And we just had a great time. And it was so wonderful, the connections that those students were making with each other. They were like, we're going to have a movie night. I'm going to call you over here. Oh, this job? Okay, I'm going to bring you onto the industry. I'm going to get you involved. And so to me, that was just the next generation working together to help AU and SOC.
Okay, so I would love so my dream for SOC the next 30 years is it starts with being a named school. And so, we see all these schools of communication, and I don't even care what name is attached, but I want the prestige of being a named school because that would be a significant life-changing gift. The sort of dirty little secret about SOC that people don't know is that back in 1993, we wanted to be an independent school so bad that we made what people said it was a bad deal. We launched as an independent school with $40,000, which is nothing. And so when we think about, sort of the struggles that SOC has had, so many of them are financial because we never had that strong footing. And so being a named school will come with a huge amount of money to help to support that. And I think that would just be a game changer.
Yeah, I would say that I'd echo that. But I do think they can name it like maybe the Jayaswal Kumar School of Communication. I think that would be fantastic. Not that we would contribute to that, but just our name, names only. I think more resources towards the school. All of us who teach here and all of our students who come here know what we do. We need to make sure others know what we do. I mean, we work very hard. Our students work very hard. We do so many things. There isn't probably, when I talk about our school, I'm like, what other schools of communication do you have? PR, journalism, communication studies, film and media arts, gaming, all under one roof. Very, very rare, right? And so we have something special. We just need folks to really know that. And so that's what I'm hoping in the next 30 years, we really land and make a mark in terms of the kinds of the schools of communication that are known but are not as good as us. And that's what I want, is reputation.
Yeah. And I would just add one thing. If any alums are listening to this Media in the Mix podcast, we don't necessarily have a culture of giving at American, and we certainly don't have a culture of giving in SOC, being a young school. But, if your time here was as valuable as, and life-changing as we think it was, give back to the school, pave the way for that next generation of change makers, because really any gift really helps. We just did a wish list for SOC 3, and an alum who had graduated only 2 years ago, she's funding our end of the year reception because she really wanted to do something. It's not a huge gift, but it's significant and it's meaningful. And so never think any gift is too small. We will take any gift that you have, but think about giving back. That's something that I'd really like to see change and something nurtured along the way.
Well, I would just say that, one thing that, again, puts us apart from some of the other schools is our experiential learning. And so having opportunities like this where our staff members are saying, hey, we are also part of this learning and engagement with our students. So let's do a pop-up learn how to do a podcast. And here you are. And, I think that's wonderful. I think, again, that puts us and separates us from the other schools. And the last thing I'll say is, once an eagle, always an eagle.
Yeah. I could just add, I look around and I see, students signing up for things like this. That's just like, again, that ethos of SOC, right? Always wanting to jump in and do more, learn more, have new experiences, doing the New York Intensive, doing the Los Angeles Intensive, applying to SOC 3. I just love that there's always that excitement for students to just dive in. We're always there for them to give them that opportunity, but they also have to be kind of wanting the opportunity. And I feel like there's never a lack of that enthusiasm. And I hope that's something that no matter what happens, we'll always endure.